Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Batman vs. Aliens. Now, Batman vs. Aliens is a graphic novel written by Ron Marz and illustrated by Bernie Wrightson. I'm not sure if I'm saying his last name right. And of course, this was published by DC and Dark Horse Comics. Now, this was first published as a two-part comic book series, which was published in 1997, but later on those two parts were put together in the form of one graphic novel. Now, I have Batman vs. Aliens in this collection here. Now, this collection has several stories that feature DC characters going up against the Xenomorphs from the Alien franchise. Now, Batman vs. Aliens is, of course, a spin-off of the Batman comics, but it's also a spin-off of the Aliens comics, which were put out by Dark Horse. Now, in 1979, you had Ridley Scott's groundbreaking sci-fi horror film, Alien, which was a huge success when it came out, and 7 years later, James Cameron made a sequel to that movie titled Aliens, which a lot of people consider to be better than the original, and Aliens was such a success that they ended up doing a spin-off comic book series. Now, the Aliens comics started out actually as a sequel to the movie Aliens. Keep in mind, this was before Alien 3 came out, so the Aliens comics actually picked up where the movie Aliens left off, but later on they kind of went off into their own thing. And as the Aliens comics went on, you had like Aliens vs. Predator comics, and Aliens vs. Judge Dredd comics, and eventually you had Batman vs. Aliens comics, and Superman vs. Aliens comics. So, Batman vs. Aliens by Ron Marz is the first Batman story to feature Batman going up against the Xenomorphs from the Alien franchise. Of course, this comic does not appear to actually be set in the continuity of the Alien films. Now, the plot of Batman vs. Aliens is it follows Batman going down to this jungle in, I think, like South America, and he's looking for a missing WayneTech employee, but when he gets down there, he runs into this group of mercenaries, and at first, Batman and these mercenaries do not like each other at all, because Batman feels like they're getting in his business, and they feel like Batman is getting in their business. So what happens in the story is Batman and these mercenaries eventually find this crashed alien spacecraft, and on the spaceship they find these dead aliens, and it looks like something burst out of their chest. And they find these eggs, and they find the remains of a facehugger, and of course it turns out that these aliens found the Xenomorphs somewhere out there in the galaxy, and they crash-landed on Earth. And now the Xenomorphs are in this jungle, and long story short, Batman and these mercenaries eventually run into the Xenomorphs, and it turns out that one of these mercenaries actually has an agenda of her own. Now, Batman vs. Aliens I thought was a really entertaining graphic novel, and I would definitely recommend this if you're a Batman fan, and especially if you're a fan of the Aliens franchise. And this book actually has some pretty effective scenes. Like, there's a scene in this book where Batman has this nightmare where he's a kid again, and he's back on the street where his parents were murdered, and instead of being shot, he sees an alien burst out of both his parents' chests. Now, if I were to have a complaint about this book, I would say some of the characters, like the mercenary characters, come across as a little two-dimensional, at least in my opinion, but all the characterization of Batman in this book is really well done. I just thought, like, the mercenary characters were a little two-dimensional, in my opinion. Now, this book spawned two sequels, one in 2003 called Batman vs. Aliens 2, 2, which was written by Ian Edginton, and I freaking love that book. But if you haven't read Batman vs. Aliens 2 by Ian Edginton, I highly recommend that one. And I read that one way before I read this one, and I actually already did a review on that graphic novel a couple of years ago. I actually reviewed it when I first started doing these Batman reviews, which I do every January, so definitely check out my review of that graphic novel, and definitely check out the graphic novel Batman vs. Aliens 2 by Ian Edginton. I highly recommend it. It's one of my personal favorite Batman stories. And Batman vs. Aliens 2 is actually available in this collection, but I also have it as a standalone graphic novel. The second sequel to this book was published in 2007, and that was called Superman and Batman vs. Aliens and Predator, and that was written by Mark Schultz, and I actually already did a review on that one earlier on this month when I was doing all those Superman reviews. But yeah, that was my review on Batman vs. Aliens, which I have in this collection right here. So yeah, bye.